You're listening to The Capital Table. Private capital markets have been evolving for many years, but never more so than in recent times. Take a seat at the Capital Table with leading experts discussing insights into the private equity and M&A worlds, and take away the knowledge you need to excel in a rapidly changing marketplace. We know this is one table you'll leave feeling full and satisfied.
Welcome to Witham's Private Equity Podcast Series. We're talking about the changes in the credit and debt markets in the age of COVID-19. Hi, I'm Steve Brady, partner and practice leader of Transaction Advisory at Witham. We're very pleased today to be joined by two of our good friends, Mark Birkett, partner in the Debt Advisory Group at Livingstone Partners, and Steve Lewis, managing director with Capstone Headwaters. So before we get to talking about the state of the debt markets, maybe Mark first, and then Steve, you can tell us a little bit about your backgrounds.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm as you mentioned, partner in our debt advisory practice at Livingstone. Livingstone is a middle market investment bank focused on both healthy M&A, debt advisory, as well as special situations. And in my role, we help clients raise capital, everything from asset-based loans through non-control equity, both in healthy as well as more challenged situations. I've been at Livingstone about 4 years, in the investment banking debt advisory world for about 9 years, and in middle market leverage finance for about 17 years.
Okay, this is Steve Lewis. Again, Steve, thank you very much for asking me and my firm to participate. Greatly appreciate it. I'm a grizzled veteran of the middle market lending space, having spent about 40 years in the game at a variety of institutions. My role at Capstone Headwaters is I head up the international debt advisory practice for Capstone Headwaters. So transactions involving debt capital needs outside of the United States or inbound in certain circumstances are part of my remit for the firm. We are a middle market focused full service investment bank with 16 offices, 175 professionals in the United States, and a network of a further 440 professionals around the world.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Mark. So let's get to talking about the state of the debt markets. And in no particular order, but certainly with those backgrounds, you can see Steve's got a lot of experience on the international markets, and Mark primarily focused domestically, but their firms and them as individuals are working all around the world. So looking forward to your insight. Mark, Steve, lenders state they're open for business. So what categories of lenders are getting deals done, and what are they doing in this pandemic environment? Mark, I'll toss it to you first.
Yeah, it's generally speaking, I think most lenders are open for business at this point. That may not have been the case early on in the pandemic in the second quarter, but as we sit here today, I think it's a fair statement that both commercial banks as well as private credit funds are open for business. Certainly their credit appetites have changed over time, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little more, but I think what we're seeing is a tightening of underwriting standards for certain businesses. At the same time, for other industries, we are seeing it's almost as low nothing has happened. And the demand for solid credits that haven't been impacted by COVID is as strong as ever. And levels that we're seeing in terms of pricing leverage are at pre-pandemic levels today, with fewer deals in market available to those lenders, and that's driving demand from those lenders and driving terms to the borrower's favor.
I would agree with Mark's overall comment. A couple of further refinements. I think the question of whether lenders are open for business is also dependent upon what sectors those lenders lend into. Certainly, there's been a retraction of transactions overall in terms of overall volume, but certainly in certain areas of the economy, notably things like retail and mineral and mining, they've dropped off the face of the earth in large measure, and lenders are quite skeptical going into those sectors. Contrasting that with, for example, IT, healthcare, and anything that has to do with industrial technology. Lenders are quite anxious to look at those things. I would agree generally with Mark that pricing and leverage have come back somewhat. I don't completely think that that pricing and leverage has come back to pre-pandemic levels. Certainly, the data we look at across a number of different providers would suggest that there's still a bit of tightening in the pricing area, as well as looking very carefully at capital structures and making sure that the leverage is something that can be covered. And a lot of, as Mark correctly said, there's a lot more scrutiny in the underwriting process in terms of whether a particular business has weathered the COVID storm and what its prospects are for the future.
Yeah, Mark, Steve touched on a few of the sectors that are either more active, less active. I mean, what's your view on the sectors that deals are getting done in?
It's very clearly those that were unimpacted, and you think about those types of industries. As Steve mentioned, technology, software, those were the ones that have really just flown right through relatively unscathed. Insurance, anything that's touching the insurance world, where even if you're not driving your car as much, there's still going to be a need for people to renew their car insurance. And so insurance brokerages, insurance services, government services. We've even seen pretty strong demand from lenders in certain, I would call them essential consumer services, things like pest control, HVAC. Again, you're not going to allow your air conditioner or furnace to go unrepaired no matter what's going on. And so those types of businesses, which have really flown through COVID relatively unscathed, maybe some early bumps along the way, but demand for those types of businesses has been incredibly strong, and it seems as though it's only getting stronger as we start realizing who the truly impacted businesses are, and it makes the ones that are not impacted shine even a little bit brighter.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I would also add in the business services sector, particularly the BPO sector, outsourced services. Particularly in this kind of environment where people are trying to find a way to get things done remotely. Those businesses have attracted quite a bit of attention, not only from lenders, but on the M&A side of things as well. So that's another area of the economy that is moving along at a nice clip.
So overall, certainly it's also going to vary by sector, but what are the two of you seeing from a pricing leverage standpoint? Again, just over general comment without individual differences between sectors.
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. As I mentioned, it's become a little bit of the world of haves and have-nots, and I don't think I'm very unique in saying that. That seems to be a general consensus out there. And if you will fall into the have, and the have being relatively unimpacted by COVID, pricing and leverage is as robust as it was back in February before everything changed. And so you're seeing full leverage multiples, relatively aggressive pricing for those types of businesses. If you have been impacted, your business has been impacted and has not shown a rebound yet, there may not be a market for your business out there. We've been in market with a couple of businesses that have not turned the corner as they had anticipated. And while there was initial interest from lenders, as it became clear that the downturn was going to be more protracted for those businesses, there really was no market at which lenders were interested in transacting. And then, somewhere in between, those businesses that were hit and have now started to show some resilience and come back. Leverage is down anywhere from a half to a full turn, and pricing may be up 50 to 100 basis points, nowhere near what it was in the first few months of the shutdown, where pricing had ramped up quite significantly. I think things have moderated, and again, it definitely matters how you've been impacted through the last 6-7 months.
I think all of that Mark stated is directionally and correct and very accurate. I would add to that, however, that there's a difference in the size of the transactions, and that really does impact a lender's thought process. The data we look at would suggest that if you're in the total enterprise value range of, say, for example, 10 to 25 million, the very small cap end of the marketplace. Your leverage, your total leverage available in the marketplace, from regardless of what source, is going to be a lot lower by almost 2 full turns than a business that its enterprise value is someplace between 100 and 250. So you've got the size matters issue out there as well, and that translates, of course, not only into the total debt, but to the pricing of that debt. So I think you've got a number of things working here. You've got sector preference, you've got size preference, and that translates into pricing. And as Mark correctly said, to the extent that in any of those things that you can demonstrate you're either COVID proof or COVID resilient versus COVID impacted, it's going to make a huge difference in the availability of credit.
What are the two of you seeing? I mean, we've seen a number of deals as it relates to COVID where revenues have been generously lifted because of COVID in various industries. What are the underwriting criteria lenders are looking at? I know that's something that we're working very closely with clients on. To what is that sustainable revenue stream? How much of this is a permanent uplift versus a temporary during COVID? Is that an area lenders are really digging into? How does that impact the leverage ratios and the underwriting?
Let me start, Mark. You can chime in on me, okay? Steve, you hit it right on the head. The sustainability question, the recurring revenue question, the ability to have a line of sight to what's going to happen next is something that I think the lenders are really starting to pay a lot more attention to than they were pre-COVID. There was an awful lot of shall we say, leniency pre-COVID around what we saw as revenue generation and add backs to EBITDA and that sort of stuff as they tried to figure out how much to lend. I think now there's a lot more skepticism on add backs. I also think that the reality of the revenue, and to your point, Steve, about a lot of businesses having nice healthy upticks in their revenue numbers, is that going to go down when people have something else to do other than take care of their homes and do that sort of thing. So what we've seen both domestically as well as internationally is a laser focus on revenue, sources of revenue, sustainability of revenue, and predictability of that.
Yeah, Steve nailed it. And it's from an anecdotal perspective, we were actually working on a transaction. It's almost hard to believe, but they had shifted some production to produce hand sanitizer, straight out of the headlines. And lenders certainly looked at that with a little bit of an askew eye, wondering how sustainable the margins and the ramp in revenue associated with hand sanitizer was. And what we had seen there was there was certainly there was belief that it could be a new category for that business, but certainly not sustainable at the levels or at the margins that they had been getting. The good news was that when we had been looking at it, had been in the financials for only a few months, and so it made up a relatively small portion of the overall earnings. But I think as we get now 6-7 months into the impact being felt, and if there is an uplift that is starting to become a larger portion of the overall TTM profile of the business, I think we're going to see increasing scrutiny from lenders on being willing to underwrite that elevated, whether it's from a new product category or just an general uplift in sales. And I think the one caveat, if I can contradict myself to that, is I think there is a general belief out there that our lives, in terms of how we go about doing many things, has probably changed, maybe not permanently, but certainly pretty significantly. And I think there are going to be cases to be made that there is a permanence to some changes that these businesses experience, because I think as consumers and people, business people going about our daily lives, we're going to start going about things a little bit differently. And so if you're able to make a case that that change is as a sort of a believable path to being a little more permanent, I think you have a better chance of getting support for that. But I certainly think the increasing component of that uptick in TTM is going to be something that we start dealing with more and more.
Yeah, those are great insights. Let's change our attention to the rest of the world. Certainly we're seeing a great increase in cross-border activity, mostly inbound, in particular from Europe, looking at several different sectors in the U.S. I guess just at a high level, I mean, what's your view on that? Certainly start with you, Steve, on the cross-border activity, how lenders are viewing that increase, and what are the important dynamics there?
I'm not sure this podcast is long enough. Anyway, if you'd asked me that question, Steve, in the second quarter, I would have said cross-border activity, inbound or outbound, was more or less dead. It's changed in the third quarter. There's a recognition that, notwithstanding certain people's views in a variety of governments, the world is global and supply chains are global, and all of that. So the notion is, how do we, what do we have to do to grow our businesses, and where does that mean we have to grow? It's not surprising that activity has picked up inbound from Europe into the U.S. We see it quite a bit right now. Indeed, we just completed a transaction involving Canada, U.S., and Germany just in the last week to 10 days. So we are cautiously optimistic that is going to be a sustainable trend. The reason I say it's not surprising coming from Europe is, notwithstanding the way our economy may have bounced around a bit over the last couple of years, there's still a widely held belief that the U.S. is a safer haven than a lot of other places for foreign investment, and they also understand that there's a rather large pool of available capital in the United States, as well as talent in the United States. And so to the extent that they want to, and of course the United States is, depending on whose statistics you read, the first or second largest consumer market in the world. So the result is, if you want to be a global player in just about any industry, you need to have a presence in the United States. So while Europe was shut down for a while, there are cautious reaches back into the States in certain industries, certainly in healthcare, in IT, as I said before, in industrial technology applications. All of those things, people are universally focused on the notion that this pandemic has demonstrated that technology is going to be a driver of growth. So those kinds of things. Of course, inbound investment into technology also has the possibility of getting in front of the CFIUS and having additional governmental scrutiny. But planning for that and planning ahead, you can get through that. As I said, we just completed a transaction where that was true. So it's a mixed bag. There's, without going into taking up too much more time, the Asia Pacific investment in the United States, of course, is met with some considerable pushback at both a governmental as well as other levels for a host of reasons that are well beyond the scope of this podcast. But the notion is that the Asian investment is still out there. They still want to be in the United States, and there's still interest in that investment. But it has a few more hurdles to get over than inbound from Europe. With that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
I don't know that I'm going to try to top. Steve obviously has such a long history of dealing internationally. The one thing that we have seen at Livingstone, and we deal primarily in the lower end of the middle market, $5 to $15 million of EBITDA. We have more employees over in Western Europe than we do in the U.S. And before all of this, the COVID pandemic hit, we had seen just a continued uptick in the need for us to market our transactions, our M&A transactions, on a cross-border basis. And to all the reasons that Steve mentioned, we anticipate that even at the lower end of the middle market, that's only going to continue. Then that this pandemic probably has only accelerated people's need to look elsewhere for yield protection, diversity, whatever it might be. And so we think for businesses like ours, where we have a true international footprint, we're going to be the benefactor of some of those changes, or I guess ongoing changes.
Yeah, I would echo that, Mark. Not to belabor the point, but with our about 30% of our annual volume on a historical basis is cross-border. That took a hit in the second quarter, but it's coming back pretty robustly. So, I think the trend line's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and certainly we're seeing the trend line in the right direction, to pick up on those words. And Mark, Steve, this has been just a great discussion on the state of the debt markets and what's going on here in the United States and cross-border. So thank you again for your time today.
You've been listening to The Capital Table. For more information, please visit withum.com. Thank you for listening.